The new chapter is going to talk about the fast days and praying, crying out to Hashem for other types of calamities besides what we spoke about in the earlier chapters about the fasting for specifically because there's no rain. Here we're going to talk about other types of issues or other more, and we'll soon see that they're actually more strict cases, more severe challenges that we make very strict fasts for, not just the ones that we spoke about before, where it's very lenient the first three, and then another three, a little more strict, and then finally 7 that are very strict. Here we're going to see that some of these fast days are start off with the same intensity as the last 7 of the previous type. Okay, so we're starting this 3rd chapter, and the chapter is called Seder Taanis, the Seder, the order of these fasts, or Seder Taanis Elu, the order of these fasts. The previous chapter is very similar. It was called Seder Taanis Ketzad, and this is called Seder Taanis Elu. So it's just the title of the chapter in the first words, the first 3 words. So the previous chapter was Seder Taanis Ketzad. This is called Seder Taanis Elu, the order of these fasts. And what the Mishnah is starting off telling us is that the order of these fasts that we spoke about, that applied to the rain. That applied when it didn't rain. But now we're going to talk about other types of issues. So let's do it inside. We're on 18b, Yud Ches Amud Beis, the new chapter. If you're in the art scroll, it is 18b4. 18b4. Seder Taanis Elu, the order of these fasts that we spoke about in the first chapter and the second chapter. Ha'omer b'Retiree Rishona, which are spoken about regarding the first rains, that it doesn't rain. It didn't rain at the time when it was supposed to. The Gemara will explain exactly what that means, Retiree Rishona. But the order of those fasts, that was what we spoke about before. Aval but smachim shashinu, growths that have grown in a way that changes them from their norm. They have abnormal growth. In other words, the grain was supposed to grow properly, obviously, and it has some type of abnormal growth. Seems to be causing there to be maybe thorns instead of the wheat or barley, and so on, and things like that. And that is a very serious type of a plague or situation. And the Mishnah says, Masriyan alehen miyad, we immediately cry out about them, cry out to Hashem. The Gemara earlier spoke about what is Masriyan. We had a Gemara earlier, and it said that when we spoke about it earlier, Masriyan meant the blowing the shofar, but Masriyan sometimes means crying out with the prayer of Anenu, asking Hashem to answer us. And here, the word Masriyan, the Taanis mentions it also means they fast, except where we'll soon see there are cases where you don't. But generally, the word Masriyan would mean we fast and we cry out to Hashem. And based on the argument that we had in the first chapter, Masriyan, the crying out is either with a shofar or it's with the words of Anenu, the prayer that we say in Slichas. And we had an argument in the Gemara what Masriyan means, even though we did speak about Masriyan, the Gemara there on Yudalid, on Daf Yudalid, the Gemara over here, right? That was the I said, what is Masriyan? Al Elu Masriyan b'Shabbos. Quoted our Mishnah actually. But on these we are Masriyan. That was a Gemara there. The my Masriyan had an argument. Let me mute everyone because we got some noise here. Okay, so that on page Yud Dalet, page 14a, we had you got to look back really and remember the Gemara before, because Gemara before said that what is Masriyan, and that had to do with the last 7 fast days. It said over there that we are Masriyan, we cry out. So Rabbi Yehuda said b'shoifres, and Rabbi Yehuda bereid Rav Shmuel bar Shelas in the name of Rav said that it's Anenu, and then the Gemara said that b'shoifres kuli almaloi pligi, that it's called Hasra. That is shoifres for sure is called Hasra, and there's no question that in the Mishnah that it says about the last 7 fast days, those you definitely do use a shofar. When do they argue in other types of tragic situation, danger situation, punishment situations? There you have a machlokes if it means asra, anenu, if asra means anenu, or if it means shofars. If it means blowing the shofar. So that was an argument on page 14. Now we're here and we're seeing the other cases where it talks about Masriyan, and we basically have this shaila. Does it mean a shofar? There are 2 opinions. It either means with shofar or means with crying out, and anenu with the prayer that's said by slichus. So here, what we're seeing, as we just mentioned, the first type of plague where there's abnormal growth in the grain, we already jumped to the most extreme type of fasts, Masriyan. By the rain, before when we spoke about it didn't rain, and so then we have 3 fasts, another 3 fasts. Finally, at the final 7, then we have Masriyan. Here, we're Masriyan immediately. So it's much more strict. And the reason is, mipnei, no, I skipped the line. V'chein, and also, shepasku geshamim ben geshem legeshem arboim yoim, and also in a case where it stopped raining between the first rain and the second rain, and there was no rain in between, of 40 days long. So what that means is that we need the initial rain to get the crops growing, but you also need more rain to get to maintain the growth, to let it continue developing. And here it's not continuing to develop, so therefore we would be Masriyan Aleihen. We would do this very serious type of prayer of crying out with a shofar, and we would be doing this Masriyan right when we need to, right when we see this problem. Masriyan Aleihen. Why? Because this is a makkah, a plague of a shortage of food. This is a plague of a shortage of food. The Gemara is going to be bothered with the fact that it's not a shortage of food yet. You got to wait till people expect the grain to finally go to the stores. Why are we calling it a plague of a shortage of food? It's not really a plague yet. The plague will happen when it's time for this grain to be sold in the marketplace. That's really what the plague is. But we're calling it a makas b'tzeres. The Gemara will explain what that means. So yardu litzmach, and then the Mishnah continues, and this is a very long Mishnah because this entire chapter is basically this Mishnah, similar to the previous chapter, that even though in the Mishnayos it's divided up into a number of different Mishnahs, but when it comes to the Gemara just combines all the Mishnahs together in this chapter. So we've got a long Mishnah here, and the Mishnah mentions to us the case of Yardu Litzmach. If the rain came and it rained upon the growths, Avaloi Yardu Le'ilon. So like the plants, it rained on the plants, but it didn't rain on the Elon. Elon is a tree. Le'ilon, or it rained on the trees, V'loi Litzmach, and not on the plants. Lazeh Lazeh, or maybe it rained on both the trees and the plants. Avaloi Le'bayres, but not or plants. It could mean the crops, the possibly wheat. But the problem is it rained on everything, but not for lebayres, l'shichen, or l'ma'aros, not for the cisterns or the pits, the ditches, and the caves. And what that means is they used to drink water. The reservoir of water would be in some type of either a cave or a pit or a ditch, and that would be the water that they would be drinking water. So if it rained for the crops and for the trees, but it didn't rain for the drinking water, that would also be a very serious problem. And Masriyan Alehen Miyad, we would cry out to Hashem for these immediately. Now, what about a city that no rain fell upon? So you may think that this would fall into the category of the rains we spoke about in the previous chapters. And here, the Mishnah doesn't seem to say that. Here, the Mishnah says that a city that the rain did not fall upon, Dichsiv, as it says in a verse about being punished, that v'him tarti al ir achas, I will make it rain on one city, v'al ir achas loy amtir, and on one city I won't cause rain to fall there. Chelka achas timater, one portion, like one field, will be rained upon, and the other portion, the other fields will not. This is all part of like a curse or a punishment. And in such a situation, the Mishnah continues on page 19a, Oiso ha'ir misane umasras. That city, it will fast and will cry out. And all the surrounding areas will fast, but not. They won't call out. They don't need to do the crying out or the shofar. Just that city does both. It fasts and cries out. Now here it's interesting is where we see where it uses the word masras, but it also says fasts. Now, we explained earlier that when it says masras, it generally means fasting. It's included as part of the crying out as fasting. So why here does it say they would fast and they would cry out? So the reason is because there is an argument here, and here is where we have to spell it out. In the previous cases, everyone agrees that you fast whenever you cry out, either with shofar or with the Anenu prayer, you fast as well. But here we're going to see Rabbi Akiva, the next opinion. Rabbi Akiva says, Masriyos v'loy masanos, that the surrounding areas, they do not have to fast. They just call out. So because we have such a situation, according to Rabbi Akiva, where you'll have one without the other, so that's why the first opinion has to spell it out and say we do both. For the city itself has to do both. In the surrounding cities, they fast, but they don't call out. And Akiva says the opposite. They call out, they cry out, and they don't fast. Okay, so that is the case where we've got a city that doesn't have rain. The reason why this is different than the previous Mishnayos, where we had a series of fasts before we do this strict fasts, the 7 strict ones. We had a whole series of fasts beforehand. And on this situation here in the Mishnah that we just learned, it seems, why are we jumping right away to this very strict fast of Masriyos? Misana Masriya, that city has to do some very serious praying. Why are we giving such a verdict that they have to do Misana Masras, they have to fast, they have to cry out? And the previous Mishnayos and previous Gemaras all mentioned about first the scholars fast, then we have some lenient fast, then a little mediocre fast, then we have strict. What does this Mishnah mean? So the answer is that here we're dealing with a unique situation that's very strange. One city doesn't have rain, but all the other surrounding places have rain. So this is a much more serious type of issue where we see it's clearly happening because of their sins. This is not just, not raining and, things happen. This is like a direct punishment from Hashem and, happening right now. And therefore, we immediately jump to Misana Umasra. We do the fasting and the calling, the crying out. So the Mishnah continues. The Mishnah told us that in this scenario, what about the surrounding cities? The surrounding cities also have to do something. The first opinion was they fast. The second opinion was they cry out. But the surrounding cities are also going to have. Now, why do the surrounding cities have to pray? Seemingly, this is not a punishment for them. It's a punishment for the city that didn't get the rain. And the answer is that where is the city that didn't get the rain? Where are they going to come knocking on the doors? Where are they going to come buying out our produce, emptying out our shelves? They're going to be coming to our cities, the surrounding cities. So therefore, the surrounding cities also need to participate somewhat in this prayers or in the fasting, and so on. So this is the way Rashi learns it. If you look in the third line of Rashi, Rashi says, "Heilech liknais hatvua ba'isa'ir barav." It's going to actually cause a famine in the city that has food because they're going to go to buy the grain from that city. That's the way at least Rashi learns. There is another opinion in the commentaries that says they have a responsibility to help out their neighbor, and being that their neighbor is suffering, they should try to participate in the suffering of their neighbor, fast for them, pray for them. Now the Mishnah continues and says, "Chol ir, any city sheyesh ba dever, a city that has a dever, a type of pestilence, which we'll soon see in the Mishnah. It's going to ask, what is this? But if there is a dever or a oimapilas or a collapse, Rashi gives the example, the wind causes the collapse of the houses. In the walls of the city and the houses, they fall. So that's a collapse. The Rambam says it means an earthquake. But any city that has such a thing, Misana umasras, they have to fast and cry out. In all the surrounding cities, Misanois v'lei masriyos, they fast, but they do not. I'm sorry, Misanois, they fast, v'lei masriyos, and they do not cry out. Rabbi Akiva Eimer masriyos v'lei masanois. Rabbi Akiva says again, he argues similar to what he argued earlier, same as he argued earlier in the other case, And here also he says they cry out the surrounding areas, the light misanos, but they do not have to fast. Now, what is this dever? Ezeu dever. What is the dever, this pestilence? Ir hamaitzia chomesh meyois ragli, a city that has 500 men. Another interpretation is a city that has 500 soldiers. V'yatzu mimena gimel mesim v'gimel yamim. And 3 people died in 3 days, zeh achar zeh, one after another. And such a scenario is a sign that this is called a dever. This is called a this is a considered a 1 second. Hareza dever, pachas mekan ain't a dever, but any less than this is not a dever. Now on the side, they bring another version of this. The understanding of what we just read was if, let's say, 2 people died in 3 days, or if 3 people died in 2 days, that's not considered a dever. That's not considered a divine decree. Now, it also mentions that they have to be healthy people who died, not old people who are on their deathbeds. This is a this is specifically like a sign. We're seeing a sign that there is a serious type of punishment from Hashem, pestilence that's a divine decree from Hashem. Now, the Mishnah continues and says that al elu masriyan b'chol makom, on these we always cry out in all places when we find out about this, even if it's not happening to us in our city, but we still are masriyan, we still participate in this prayer and we cry out. Al hashidafain, for wind blast, which causes the crops to get dirty and inedible. Val hayirakain, a yellowing of the grain, withering of the grain. Ve'al ha'arba, ve'al ha'chosil, 2 types of locusts, arba and chosil, if there's a plague of locusts. Ve'al ha'chaya ra'ah, dangerous animals that are attacking people. Ve'al ha'cherev, the sword, which means an army is passing through your land, even if the army is not out to fight a war with you. They're just passing through your land. On all of these cases, masriyin aleha, we cry out, because this is a makkah, a plague, a calamity, a challenge that is mehalechas, that is traveling. So even if it's not applicable to you now, we all could be potentially in harm's way. A story that the elders came from Yushalayim, le'arehem, to their cities, v'gazru Taanis, and they decreed a fast al shenira kemaloi pitanur shidafain biashkel. Why did they make a fast? Because there was a oven size the size of an oven mouth, mole pitanur, that's the opening of the oven, that size in the olden days. Imagine, the ovens probably were not that big, but even they had a small, whatever the opening of the oven was, that opening size, that's how much the wind blast had damaged the grain in Ashkelon. And because of that, the entire Yerushalayim was fasting. They decreed a public fast. Now, Ashkelon is all the way, it is not so close. It's southwest, and Yerushalayim is more east. And nevertheless, they made a fast because if the blast is happening there, it's going to potentially affect us as well. The Oid Gazru Taanis, and they also decreed a fast, Al Sha'achlu Ze'evim, Shnei Tinoikos Ve'evar Yarden, that the wolves ate 2 children trans-Jordan. Again, this is over the Jordan River. Nevertheless, they decreed a fast in Yerushalayim because of this. Rabbi Yossi says, Loy al sha'achlu ala al shaniru. Rabbi Yossi says that they didn't decree the fast because they ate these children, they devoured the children, but rather because they saw wolves in the city, and therefore this would be a cause to fast. There's wild animals in the city, even if nothing happened, that would be a cause to fast. Now, there is a question here. Is Rabbi Yossi arguing on the first opinion, or is he just saying that, is he arguing in halacha, or is he just saying that the story you have is wrong? Is the story wrong, or is there a difference in Jewish law? Now, what do I mean? Well, you could learn that Rabbi Yossi is just saying the story was not that they devoured children. It was that there were wolves that were seen in the city, and that was already a problem that, the potential danger, that was reason to make a fast, and that would have been Rabbi Yossi's argument on the first opinion. But really, they both agree that if you see them in the city, that would be a reason to make a fast. The first opinion said they made the decree after they devoured 2 children, so that was the story. But really, maybe everyone would agree that if you see wild animals in the city, should be enough to make a fast. Now, or you could say that Rabbi Yossi and the first opinion argue. Rabbi Yossi says that even if you just see them in the city, that's enough to make a fast. The first opinion says, no, it's only if they actually attack or only if they actually kill that we would make a fast. Now, the Mishnah continues here, and this is a part of the Mishnah that we did bring down when we were arguing, when we saw the Gemara's argument about Masriyan. The Gemara brought this down to discuss what does Masriyan really mean. This was a proof that it can't always mean shofar. It says, Al elu Masriyan b'Shabbos. On these, we cry out on Shabbos. Of course, it can't be with a shofar because you don't cry out on Shabbos with a shofar. It also doesn't mean that you fast, because we don't fast on Shabbos. So here it means, Masriyan means anenu. Al elu Masriyan b'Shabbos, al ir shekifu nachrim. For these we cry out with anenu on Shabbos, on a city that the enemy, the goyim, have surrounded. They've made a siege around our city, and we do cry out for such a thing on Shabbos, or nahar, or the river is overflowing, or is threatening to wash away the fields, the land, the houses. So it's the river is, we see it ready to spill over its edges. Balasfina metarefes bayam, and the boat that is wavering, is being tossed around in the sea. Rabbi Yosi says, LaEzra v'layla tza'aka, that we can cry out for assistance from other people, but we do not do the Anenu prayer, and that wouldn't be appropriate on Shabbos. But we can ask others to help. At least that's one way of understanding it. Another pshat over here is that LaEzra v'layla tza'aka means that we can daven in private, but not do something in public. Shimon HaTeimani, Shimon the Teimani that says, Afal HaDever, also for pestilence, we do cry out on Shabbos, but the rabbis didn't agree. They said the case where you cry out on Shabbos is an Shikifu HaNachrim, is a city that Goyim sieged. Shimon HaTeimani wanted to say even on a dever, pestilence, but the rabbis didn't agree. I'll call Tzara Shalei Tavay Al Tzibur. For every calamity that should not come to the community, Masriyan Aleyan, we do cry out for them. Chutz, except Meiroiv Geshamim, if there is too much rain, and as long as it's not destroying the crops, we do not cry out because of too much rain. Again, for all these, we cry out. For every calamity, we cry out, except from Reiv Geshamim, except if there's rain that's burdensome, but it's not ruining the crops, that we do not cry out. I don't know if that's that's the meaning. I don't know if that's what I said first, but that's the meaning here, that if it's too much rain, again, there's different levels of too much, but if it's too much rain that is burdensome, not to destroy the crops, we don't do a masriyan. Maisa, and here comes a famous story. They said to Chayni, the one who makes circles, the circle maker. Chayni was famous for this. He was given this title, and we'll soon see why. And he was also known for his righteousness, and his prayers were always answered. And so the story with Chayni, the circle maker, is Palel Sheyerdu Geshamim. They told Chayni, Amru Laila Chayni Amadai, let me start again. Maisa, the story. Maisa Sha'amru Laila Chayni Amadai, they told Chayni, the circle maker, his Palel Sheyerdu Geshamim, daven that rain should fall. Amar Lahem, he said to them, go and bring in the ovens that you roast the Karban Pesach, because they should not wither, dissolve, or fall apart in the rain. Because I'm going to dive into Hashem that it rains. You better do something. Better make sure you bring in the ovens. Don't want to ruin them. Hisbalel v'layardu geshamim. So he davened to Hashem, and no rain came. Ma'asa, so what did he do? Og Uga, he drew a circle. The Amad Besaycha, he stood inside it. The Amar Lafanav, and he said before Hashem, Rabbayinai Shalayla, Master of the universe, Banecha Samu Panehem Alai, your children have turned their faces or placed their faces upon me. Shani Kven Bias Lafanecha, I am like a household member before you. Nishba'ani b'shimcha agol, I swear by your big name, your great name, she'eni zaz mikan ad she'terachim al banecha, that I will not move from here until you have mercy on your children. So he sort of threatened Hashem. He said, Hashem, I'm not going to go out of this circle unless you have mercy on your children. Eschilu geshamim menatfin, the rain started trickling. Amar, so Chayni said, Laikach shoalti, I did not request to have little drizzle. Elagishme bayres shichin umarais, I want enough rain for the pits and the ditches and the caves where people can drink, have enough, there should be enough drinking water, those should get filled. So the rains began to fall with a lot of anger, with abundance. Amar, so Chayni said, Laikach shoalti, I didn't ask for that. Alagishme ratzain bracho nadava, I want blessing rains. Blessing and gift. Nadava is contributing rains. Yerdu ketignan, so the rains fell as their norm. Ad sheyotzu Yisrael miyushalayim laharabayas, until the Yidden left from Yushalayim, the Harabayas, they had to go up to the mountain so that they wouldn't get flooded. So they went up to this mountain because of the rains. They came and they said to Chayni, just like you daven for them to rain, please daven for them to stop. Amar lahem, he said to them, go and see. Im nimches even hatoyim, if the stone of the toyim, which we'll soon see what that is, if that has become nimches, dissolved, go check, because I'm not going to stop the rain unless it has affected that Even HaToyim. Now, what is this Even HaToyim? So this stone was a stone where if someone lost an object, they would go there and there would be people who would call out, I found a certain object, it's a watch. And people would say what the signs were, and he would then, if it's the correct one, he would give it, you would return it to the owner. And
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
When he says Nimchet Even HaToim, does that mean that he's saying that the rain has gotten so high that it basically made the stone disappear so that you couldn't see it?
Yeah, that doesn't seem to mean like it'll disappear, but yeah, maybe like it'll cover it so you don't see it. It reached that height. That's what it seems like. In other words, to actually dissolve it, it uses the word nimches, but I don't know if it means it literally. That would be a little extreme for the rain to takes years for rain to cause a stone to dissolve. I think it would take a long time for that. I don't think a heavy rain is going to cause a stone to dissolve. So it is a little surprising. It uses that term. Let me just see in the this other Gemara I have here. If it mentions why it uses that word nimchas. He brings a Sefer Rashbash. Definitely means it's covered. Because it's very surprising. Even if the whole world would be covered with rain, the stone is not dissolving. However, he says the Yerushalmi does say that it means if a little of the stone dissolved. And what he really meant, according to that, is not that he's expecting that it's possible that it dissolved, but really like, forget it. There's no way I'm going to be davening for them because it's not happening. It did. It's we know that it didn't dissolve with the rain. So that's if you want to translate it literally, it would mean that Chayni was telling them, go check if it dissolved, if even a little piece dissolved, because even a little piece is not dissolving in this short time. And it's basically saying, I'm not going to, we're not going to daven to stop this rain. So that's how you could translate nimchas. Otherwise, the commentaries do seem to understand it to mean if it's covered. Okay, so the Mishnah continues and says, Shalach le Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach sent a message to him. He says, El Molei Chayni Yativ, you weren't Chayni, the holy Chayni, Goizrani Alecha Nidui, I would put you in excommunication because you spoke in like a threatening way to Hashem. And you told Hashem, and you didn't do it once, you did it twice. You said, I didn't ask for this. Not such rains did I want. I asked for a different type. So this is what Shimon ben Shetach was like. On the one hand, felt like he should put him in Cherem and Nidui and excommunicate him. But nevertheless, he said, because of if you I can't do it. You're Chayni. You're the holiest in the world. Now, the Mishnah continues. I mean, we see how Hashem listened to his prayer. What can I do? You misbehave. You sin before Hashem. And he fulfills your wishes, your desires. Like a child who sins to his father, but the father gives him what he wants. On you, the pasuk says, your father and mother are happy. And the one who gave birth to you will rejoice. So that's the story of Chayni Hamagil. We're going to see some other great stories in this chapter, so stay tuned. The Mishnah continues and says, Hayu Masanin, if they were fasting, B'yardulem Geshamim Kaidim Hanetzacham. And before sunrise, already rain came. So they started the fast. They started, at dawn. Dawn is about 72 minutes before sunrise. And by sunrise, it was already rain. So it says, Lo yashlimu, they don't complete the fast. They stop fasting. And we've spoken about this previously, and now this is the source. This is where we see a Mishnah that says it. Now, what happens if it rains after sunrise? If it begins to rain, but it's after already sunrise, so then yashlimu, they should complete the fast that the they would, in other words, they accepted on themselves to fast. They have to complete it. In the other case, where it rained before sunrise, so in a certain sense, it didn't really, the fast didn't start in its full extent, because even though they started at dawn, but really sunrise is more of a the official rules of the fast day begin at the official time would be sunrise. So we start fasting at dawn, but if it rains before sunrise, the reason doesn't, so the purpose of the fast doesn't apply anymore. So there, we would be exempt from finishing the fast. But if it already was sunrise, then we complete the fast. This is this opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says it depends on midday. Koydem chatzois. If it rains before midday, lo yashlimu, they don't have to finish the fast. If it rains after midday, then yashlimu, they should finish the fast. Midday is the cutoff point that that if it rained before midday, so really the fast begins at the main meal, the meal of the day, which they're considering to be lunch. That's the main meal. So if they didn't really push off that meal, it rained before midday, so then the fast didn't exactly begin, didn't begin in a full-fledged way, and therefore they could break the fast. There is another way of understanding it, is that if they already fasted half of the day in holiness, we have to complete the day in holiness. We should continue it as well. But if they didn't do a whole the first half, then it sort of like can be canceled. So this is the ruling about a public fast that we see over here, that it's canceled if the reason doesn't apply anymore, meaning they were fasting for rain and it rained, and you falls into one of these categories, either before midday or before sunrise, depending on the opinion that you follow. Now, the Mishnah brings a story that goes along with Rabbi Eliezer's view. Gazru Taanis Belud, a story that they decreed a fast day in the city of Lud. And the rain fell before midday. So this was exactly the case of Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Lehem Reb Tarfon said, go out and drink and make a holiday, make a Yom Tov. And they made a special holiday. The rain came, and the afternoon, excuse me, came, and they recited the Hallel Hagadol, which is not the Hallel that we know of. Hallel Hagadol refers to the Psalm in chapter, it's
So we
136. We say it on Shabbos, yeah. Chapter 136 in Tehillim, and Kili Yolam Chastoi, all of those Kili Yolam Chastois. If you pull up 136, here, let's see, Tanakh, Tehillim. It's 26 verses here, and it's supposed to stand for Yud Ke Vav Ke, and some people have that in mind when they recite this psalm, because they do the first 10 verses, have in mind the Yud, and the next 5, the Hey, the next 6. And it's basically all these praising Hashem for all these miracles. So they did this Hallel Hagadol. Okay. Now, the Gemara says, I'm sorry, the Mishnah. So that's the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara begins. And again, we're on page 19a, and we're all the way towards the bottom of the page. We're about 7 lines up from the bottom of the page. If you have the art scroll, 19a3. Seder Taanis ha'elu ha'amor b'Revi'ah Rishayna. The Seder Taanis elu, when the Mishnah said these are the fast days, that it speaks about the first, what we learned until here was about the first rain. But the Mishnah said, but now we're going to talk about what happens if there's some type of abnormal growth, or there's some type of pestilence, or all these other cases. The Gemara is very uncomfortable with that line, that what we said until here was about the first rain. It wasn't about the first rain. It was about if it didn't rain by the third rain, that's when we were fasting. So we really didn't just speak about if it didn't rain the first rain. We're talking about the third rain. And the Gemara asked this as a contradiction. Ramini, and they asked a contradiction from the following brisa that it mentions about the first rain, the second rain, third rain, which we learned a while back. Revi'ah Rishayna Ushniya Lishol. The first and second rains have to do with, if it doesn't rain by then we have to ask Hashem for rain. We start asking what's the date of asking for rain. Shlishis lis anois, the third one, the third date, in other words, when it's officially supposed to come, that third rain, and it doesn't rain by that time, then the date is necessary for us to know in order to know when to start the series of fasting. So what we said until here was not really the first rain, it's about the third rain. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yehuda Hachikamer. Yehuda says this is what the Mishnah means. Seder Taanis Almar, the previous order of the fasts that was mentioned, Amosai, when does that apply? Bisman Shiatza Revi'ah Rishayna Shniu Shlishus. When the first rain, second rain, and the third rain all passed, V'layardu Geshamim, and it didn't rain for any of these dates. Aval but Yardu Geshamim B'Revi'ah Rishayna. But what happens if it did rain, the first rain? V'zaru v'lait samchu. But if they planted and it didn't grow, inami tzamchu, or if it did grow, v'chazru v'nishtanu, when they grew abnormally, so then masriyan alein miyad, then we cry out to Hashem for these cases. So basically, the Mishnah stated the word Rishayna, Revi'ah Rishayna, but what it really means is not the first rain, it means the first rains with an S at the end. And it's referring to all three of those rains. It's referring to the Yaira rains. We're calling them the Revi'ah Rishayna. Okay, Amarav Nachman. Nachman says, Davka Nishtanu, that the case in the Mishnah where it's very serious and we cry out and fast immediately, that case is Davka, specifically Nishtanu, as if there's something abnormal growth. Aval Yabshu, they dry out. Loi, we do not cry out fast. And the reason, well, let's see what the Gemara says. Pita, isn't that obvious? It says Nishtanu. Nishtanu Tanan. It says in the Mishnah, Nishtanu, they changed. It doesn't say if they dried out. So the Gemara says, Loin tzricha, it's not necessary except for the akon. It's not, in other words, the only issue would be in a case, the reason why we need to say this is where the akon, where it started growing, it dried out, but it started growing out. So mahu de tema, I would have thought akanta milsehi, the growth is considered significant. It is important, and it's possibly that they're going to recover and grow properly, even though they're dried out. Kamash malah, and it comes and lets us hear. Rav Nachman comes and tells us that that's not going to be fixed, and therefore we don't cry out for it. Something that's going to be in vain. We don't ask Hashem for a crazy miracle to reverse the damage that's already too late. And therefore, we don't cry out for the yavshu if it dried out, because it's never gonna recover or be decent food, and therefore we don't daven, do the masriyan for that. But we will do it if it was nishtano, if it's abnormally growing. That seemingly does sometimes fix itself up and correct itself. So the case that we say that the case that the Brisa was excluding again, or that Rav Nachman, I should say, the case that Rav Nachman was excluding was a case where it dried out. And the Gemara said, obviously, if it dries out, you don't daven for that because it's too late. It's like if you burnt something in your you cooked supper and you burnt it. You can't daven to Hashem. Hashem, please fix this. It's already burned. You want to maybe make something else that should, or should work, fine. But don't daven that it shouldn't be burnt. It's already burned. Here also, if it's already dried out, it can't come back to life. There's certain things that possible, but so this is not possible. So here the Gemara says no. There was a case you might have thought it grew even after it dried out, but the akon, it grew a little. Nevertheless, because the little growth doesn't mean anything, and nevertheless, it's not going to be able to come back, and therefore you don't daven for it. And that is the Kamash Malon. That's what Rav Nachman comes and lets us hear, that it's specifically in a case of Nishtanu where it's abnormal growth. Okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Okay.